future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Heidi Lofthus.
Hello, all listeners. Today I'm talking to the source himself, Mark Grech, manager of People and Organization Consultancy in Malta, PwC. We discuss the annual HR Pulse survey. This year and last year is obviously very much data on the changes around COVID. We discuss the changes that have been implemented, the rapid changes required in terms of much added training and the technological adaptation. We talk about the changes that are yet to come and outcome yet to be discussed over the coming year. How are people actually putting their hybrid working ways in place, and how does it pan out? We discuss working hours and changes in this. Then we also discuss things that have not yet gotten the attention required or actually needed, being around the topics of mental health and upskilling, talent availability, particularly in Malta. So listen in and enjoy. Good morning, Mark.
Hi, Heidi.
Good morning. Calling in from PwC, aren't you?
Yes, here in OME in our recording booth. Thanks for having me, and really excited to be here.
I'm super exciting. I mean, this is going to be a fantastic pod. You are sharing information about the PwC latest HR Pulse survey, and it's intriguing data. First, I just wanted to say that I moved from Malta, the island, to another island in the Baltic Sea, and we have thundering snowstorms outside.
Oh, wow.
So hopefully the internet sort of manages to stay fully intact. The ferries have stopped going for the full day. So
we just went through some extreme weather ourselves, where the ferries stopped and everyone was kind of stuck inside and with floods. But today it's a typical sunny day, as usual.
Exactly. Oh, we might actually have. I might have a discussion with your colleague Carl about this in the future.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the ESG expert.
Yes.
But not about Carl now. That's coming. What about you, Mark? You come from the gaming industry previously, right?
Yeah. So prior to PwC, I worked for a few years at Evolution Gaming. In an internal-facing HR role, so I was responsible for talent development for a few European territories. So primarily focused with the management, personal development, training, employee engagement, and now I work for an external-facing HR role. So at PwC, I'm responsible for people and organization consulting services, which is basically HR consulting, change management, and any kind of consulting to do with people. For example, if an organization is going through a transformation strategy, there's obviously the technical component to it, but then there's the people side of that change. So what skills do people need? What roles are changing? What is the structure of the organization? How will it change? And that's where our team comes in with clients, both public sector and private.
So as the numbers guy that I've noticed that you are from our previous chats, reading the report and the results, it's not only the numbers, you are also out there. You meet the organizations and you see the needs and the impacts of all the changes that we're currently in.
Exactly. So my role is kind of split in two, you could say. We've got the client-facing side where I'm out there with business leaders, with employees from different industries, talking to them on almost everyday basis. And then there's the other side of our work, which is what we call like research and innovation. So we're out there conducting studies, collecting surveys from different industry leaders. We're writing articles, both for our own intern and also for different media houses, to continue to collect information about trends in terms of people challenges, organizational challenges. And between these two arms, the client-facing time and the research, the studies, we gather very valuable insight, which helps us, one, to improve our services fundamentally, to make sure that the service we offer is in line with best practices and actually tackles the problems organizations are facing. Also, we use this information to some extent influence the hot topics of the day. So either what policy leaders should focus on in terms of what they should be discussing at a very strategic level nationally, and also what people should be mindful of. So both people who are employees and they might be going through a change, through the pandemic we're going through, the digital transformation, and also the leaders themselves of organizations, for them to have on their agenda topics which we feel are important, that they should be acknowledging.
So PwC, auditing firm, that's sort of how I know it, but obviously a consultancy servicing servicing consultants as well.
Exactly.
But I mean, I've seen you around much more lately. What happened? You went from much more statistics, numbers, and audits to being out there in the organization. So I might be entirely wrong here.
Yeah, so PwC is historically an audit firm, though it's had consulting for decades. Though as time progresses, the need for consulting is continuously increasing. So over the past 10 years or so, our consulting area has grown significantly. And today, besides audit, within advisory, so consulting, we've got cybersecurity experts, ESG, people and organization, public policy, digital consultants. It's a very big team. And obviously this is done to be able to cater for different client requests, and also because the way we work is very in ad hoc teams. So for example, I'll be roped into a team which is put together for a specific project, which involves someone from ESG, from cybersecurity, from digital, someone from our tax and legal departments. And it's obviously something which is growing. If you look at consulting in the UK or in America, it's huge. There's probably more consultants than there are people doing audit, or maybe equal. In Malta, this is something which is still growing. The need for consultants has always been there, but as time passes, we're seeing more and more work come in.
And quick adaptation as well. So let's go back to the numbers and the audit of the current or the year that we are in, and what has happened in HR organizations this year then, and the Pulse. The Pulse survey, I'm interested in gaming, but this is not only gaming. This is across Malta, but all different kinds of sectors, right?
Yeah. So every year we collaborate with the Foundation for Human Resources Development, the FHRD, and we conduct this HR Pulse study across basically on a national level. This year we had about 100 organizations which participated from various industries. There were some from gaming, from banking, from finance, from insurance, ones from manufacturing, for example. So we got quite a representative sample. There was about 10% from banking, about 20% from gaming, and every year we conduct the survey to understand what are those people challenges which these organizations are facing, and try to understand where there are pain points, and also collect trends. So we compare year on year to see how, for example, the issues on talent availability are changing, how remote working is progressing. And we compile a report, obviously, and this was announced during the FHRD conference about 2 weeks ago.
One trend, and quite static trend, I would say, is I scanned through the previous year's Pulse survey as well, like what happened, what is happening since Corona. And 47 I'm reading from the papers here because there's numbers that I won't remember in my head. 47% of respondents, this is 2020, are planning to implement greater flexibility to work hours and hybrids. And I would say that this is the same this And the feeling, this has not deteriorated in terms
Not at all.
of numbers going down.
Not at all. So last year we thought that maybe this is a bit, hype of remote working,
Exactly.
or just a knee-jerk reaction to the pandemic. We had to work remotely. It wasn't an option. Everywhere was closed. It wasn't safe to meet in groups. And we found that about 47% roughly of organizations plan to shift to remote working. Now, this is in the context that over 30% cannot. There's
Exactly.
30% of organizations who cannot work remotely because they work in manufacturing, they work in healthcare, so they cannot physically, work from home. So of the remaining part of the pie, more than half of them are working remotely. And we found that this year, this figure has remained almost the same. It went down to 43%, which is essentially the same. So that indicates that the trend will remain. And also looking at the way people are talking about remote working, it's become cultural. It doesn't only become something like a buzzword or a reaction to the pandemic. And when we asked the respondents to what are your plans moving forward, these 42% said they plan to retain remote working for the next 12 months. And about 70% of these 43 said that they will keep remote working for 2 days per week.
And I'm reading here a little bit further down the row. This year, only, and I read it as a little bit, it's quite low, only 3% of the respondents have stated that the workforce will work fully remotely, even in a post-pandemic environment.
Yeah.
Why do you think? That's a total change, of course, but why are we not ready to let this go entirely and have people working remotely entirely?
Yeah. So last year, 18% were working fully remotely. This dropped, as you said, to 3%. So essentially, very, very few organizations are fully remote. So this kind of shows us that there is a reason to work from the office, not simply because you're being told to go in, but we're seeing that employees want to be in the office. They want to meet their colleagues. They want to, in the morning, put on a shirt, drive to work and maybe not the driving part because there's a lot of traffic, but actually getting out of the house, meeting their people, being in an office environment and actually collaborating. So this is primarily the main reason why employees are choosing. So they're not being, forced to come back to the office. We're seeing very few organizations who have put a specific quota who are telling people, listen, you have to be here 4 times a week. We've met very few organizations who are putting in those specific metrics. For example, at PwC, it's left to our own decision. I
was going to ask you actually, how do you guys do it?
So we've had quite a big change. We no longer have our own seating. We have hot desks, which we have a system to apply for the desk. You get a number and you find your desk in the morning and you take a seat. One of the reasons for this is because we still have lots of space. So before we had 1 person seated, 4 persons seated, now we have 1, for example. So there are actually physically less seats available. So that's one of the reasons. But another reason is because people are working remotely, and we decide when to work remotely. So, for example, I look at my week and I say, listen, I have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I need to be in this week. While Tuesday and Thursday I'm going to be at clients, so I'll book in desks for those days of the week, and go in basically. So it's kind of left a bit at our discretion.
Are you able to share more? Because I'm interested in more. The technology is there, the booking, the tables. We understand it's nice, and go meet your fellow colleagues in the office.
Yeah.
At your own discretion. This is where the questions pop up in my head. Are you required to do X amount of days a week in the office? Are there sort of criteria that if you do this, then you should be in the office? Or how is this followed up?
So of course, there's a policy in place with some guidelines, but essentially, for remote working to work, there has to be a lot of trust involved. One of the biggest inhibitors to remote working in the past was fear by management, and this I'm talking on a overall level, not specific to the organization. Before remote working wasn't becoming popular because there was limited oversight by the management on what employees would be doing. So for remote working to work, two things had to take place. Trust had to be built between managers and the employee, and the way we measure performance had to change. We couldn't anymore look at performance based on visibility in the office or time spent doing things, but very output focused. And we've taken on this trend ourselves. So we have obviously very strong relationship with our managers who follow up on our performance based on what actual deliverables take place. So how is the client work coming along? What is the, how is the client feeling about it? What's the quality of the work? Have we met our deadlines? And so on. So based on this level of trust, it's a massive cultural change, as you can imagine. So remote working isn't a logistical change; it's a culture change, purely. So the logistics can be, a bit loose, but if you don't have the right culture to facilitate working from different sites, then which involves trust by the leadership, role modeling by people who actually do work from home and show that it's okay, and of course, as you mentioned, having the right infrastructure. So we've always had really good infrastructure, so we didn't really feel a gap when we moved to remote working for the first time, because we already had all our tools in place for virtual calling, or remote access for different specific tools we use. So in that regard, we didn't really feel it. But obviously, it's mostly this change from, listen, I'm used to an environment where I'm always in the office, to now being told, listen, it's up to you. We'll follow up with you based on how things are going.
Personally, how are you taking this new cultural change? I mean, if your manager used to be able to see you, okay, Mark, sitting over there, and that used to be sort of the culture, like he's doing his job, he's here in the office. Now your manager is not in the office seeing you every day. But you have a much more tight communication. And this might sound fantastic, but it's a different kind of keeping an eye on people. Like, do you ever feel, or not only you, but also respondents and organizations that you're working with, it's not only to check up on people, are Mark feeling, and, is everything okay? But you are being checked up on in a different kind of way.
Yeah. So to answer that, I'll kind of refer again to the report as a bit of context. So why we're seeing this works is because employees are feeling a greater sense of autonomy and flexibility. Okay. The fact that I can choose where I work from psychologically lets me feel that I am not in an environment where I am, authoritative, being told where to be, what to do, how to do it. Psychologically, that gives me the an experience of feeling that I am in control of my own time. So that is one of the reasons why we feel that people are actually, it's kind of almost reverse psychology. People are told you can work from home, so they're working from the office, which is quite an interesting thing, because they're being given the flexibility to choose. Now, another reason for this is because this links to a healthier work-life balance. So if you've got errands to do, or you have a reason to be home for whatever reason, a child, it could be a pet, the fact that that you can allocate your time throughout the week and say, listen, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, at least in the morning or those days, I'm going to be from the office, allows you to have a healthier work-life balance in terms of your control over how you spend time working and how you spend time on your personal life. If you're obliged to work 9 to 5 in the office, your whole week is basically taken up. You go home, you're a bit exhausted, shops are closed, and that's your week basically.
And this we realize now.
Yeah, this exactly.
I hear what you're saying, and I fully agree. And I am 100% pro remote. I mean, I sit here in a cabin, pretending this is my office. But iGaming Next has always been remote first in that sense. So that's not a cultural change. But I know from my own experience last year, with the people that I was working with and my HR manager reporting back from the floor, that people are getting exhausted, feeling that they constantly have to be in front of the computer just because they're working from home. So there's a slight sort of opposite to this as well.
Yeah. In fact, a phenomenon we saw over the past year is remote work burnout. Yes. Which I think it's a new experience, obviously, for people, where people were burning out more while working remotely. And I mean, obviously, this is something quite probably complex even from a psychology perspective to understand what's going on. But what we do know is the fact that when you work remotely, the lines between work and home are blurred. So you wake up, you go, maybe if you're lucky, you have a room, which could be your office. Some people did not have a room. They would end up working from their kitchen or from their bedroom. If you're lucky at home, it's quiet, so you can work. Some people live with their parents, with children who had to be home as well. And when you sign off end of the day, you don't actually physically sign off and leave. You're still in your house, so you go out the corridor, for example, and so people are experiencing an always on lifestyle where at home the laptop is there, they've been on it all day, they can't really switch, their phone is always in their hand, they get phone calls after hours because people might be working later than usual. So burnout has been on the increase, and in fact in the study, one of the reasons people revoked hybrid working is to tackle this. So they said, okay, you can't be working every day from home because it's an issue, both from collaboration perspective, from creativity perspective, because we need people to be together to brainstorm, and also because we feel that too much, an extreme of something is also bad, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the reasons people want to be back home, back in the office. So my personal experience with this, in the beginning, I thought, this is amazing. This is the best thing ever. I get to work from home and I don't need to go out there where there's a virus in the air and all of these, traffic and, all of these negative things. And, you log in, you do your work, it's quiet, and you log off. But over time, I also felt this, there were times where we spent 3 months continuous at home working remotely. You don't meet your colleagues. New joiners have no idea who's who, obviously, because they joined, So definitely.
You need a variety, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, you're talking about traffic, and this makes me think you're obviously leading in terms of you have good technologies, and you sort of have to act as a good example for the organizations that you work with. When it comes to government guidelines, now I'm thinking in two different directions here, both mental health, as we were talking about, are there guidelines? You should have your people coming in X amount of days per week, but not too much because traffic is constantly jamming. We have environmental responsibility moving forwards. We saw dolphins at Tinja Point last year. What does the government say?
So the government, to this point in time, has not really, sent out some kind of guidelines to private organizations, imploring them to have people work from home because we need to reduce traffic, we need to reduce congestion, and all of these things. What they have done, though, is they've led by example. They've issued the public service remote working policy, which was launched last October of this year. This remote working policy for the public sector has an 18-month implementation phase where they're going to be identifying roles which can work remotely, either by the employee applying or the manager saying, listen, you can work from home, and creating the environment, the infrastructure where it can be done. As you can imagine, this is a massive change.
That's a cultural
huge. It's a cultural change on a national level to have the public sector, civil servants working from home. This was unheard of, unspeakable 2 years ago. But today, within a span of 18 months, the government has created a policy to make this happen, to help with work-life balance, especially, family-friendly measures. The government is actually one of the leaders when it comes to family-friendly measures in terms of what they provide. And this is, I think, an example where they've said, listen, this could work. We're going to take a bold decision and make this change. Obviously, it's still in the very early days. Have to see what time will tell the success of this. Though it is a way of leading by example.
You were saying work-life balance, and we were talking about the output of the work rather than the hours spent and flexibility.
Yeah.
So going back to the 2020 survey.
Okay.
Respondents were thinking they would actually change the way of the working hours and focus on output instead. Now, I'm one of the people that should know this, seeing my network and my membership with HR Connect. But I haven't actually seen, we haven't talked that much about the actual, apart from being flexible in time, the changes from amount of hours worked towards output.
Okay. So,
do you think that last year we thought that we were going to be much more output focused than actual hour focused, and this didn't really turn out as such?
Okay, so we haven't seen where organizations reduce the number of hours you need to work. So from 40 or from a 5-day becoming a 4-day, what we've seen in terms of hours is that, for example, people were given the choice to split up how they work. So some people, for example, have chose to work from 8 till 12 and then continue from 4 onwards, 4 p.m. onwards, giving them the afternoon off to be with their children, for example. So in terms of working hours, that's as far as it's gone in terms of flexibility. So choosing where you work and how you allocate your time. There are Scandinavian countries, as I'm sure you're aware, which have started to implement a 4-day work week. We are not there yet. They kind of discussed it for some time, but there's a big issue with productivity with regards to that. So when which I'll get to. So when I spoke about outcome-based, what we're seeing with clients is that they're changing their performance management framework to focus more on outcomes in terms of having clearly set objectives and KPIs, which are a blend of individual and team objectives. So usually like a 70-30 split. 70% of my objectives are personal and 30% are team. And that every, for example, three months, so about quarterly on average to every 6 months, these objectives are reviewed to see what came out, out of these. So moving from it being a very task-based performance management, where overseeing if you're doing your job, to it becoming more, for example, project and objective-specific performance management. Regarding the issue on productivity, we might be getting to this with regards to availability of talent in Malta. So for Malta to be able to reduce the days per week which we work, we need to significantly increase the productivity of the workforce. And to be able to do this, we need people to be upskilled significantly, to have enhanced capabilities to take on either more work or to be able to leverage technology to be more productive. Right now, we have quite a basic level of digital literacy locally. It's a big area where the government is focusing on to be able to upskill people to a level where productivity is so strong that then we can start looking at reducing hours.
Okay, so step by step, not rushing into everything. Let's do the hybrid setup first.
Okay.
No. I mean, like probably coming year will be the year when the organizations are actually living the new test periods of their hybrid strategies. I would say that in gaming, normally Q3, Q4 this year has been, now we start implementing the way we are going to work moving ahead. So I haven't seen that much of what has actually been working, what has been working and what has not. Have you got any experience from organizations having put hybrid working plans into action?
It's so early, to be honest. It's really early. Last year it was a bit of a reaction to the pandemic. Now we're almost 2 years into it, and this year has been about really formalizing these new policies and these new ways of working, and beginning to collect feedback from the employees about how they feel about it. So it's still a bit early to say, listen, it's perfect or we need to change this, because we're now moving into maybe the first year and a half of full remote working, where maybe half of that was a choice rather than being obliged by the government to stay home. But we are getting a lot of positive feedback, both from the employers. So if we look at the survey, the HR Pulse survey, the majority of respondents intend to keep it for the next 12 months. And the reasons they're doing this is because employees are requesting to work from home. So it is unlikely that we'll see organizations go back at this point in time. I think it
pressure as well.
You
can't deviate too much.
No, and I think it will be a step backwards for any organization to try and go back to how things were. I think that they probably receive a big backlash from the employees who are now, they want to work for an employer who is changing things up, who is forward looking, who is looking at the future of work and changing trends, and not trying to stick to comfort zones. And I think the successful employers locally will be those organizations who really shake things up and think outside of the box in terms of how they manage their employees.
Yeah. I was thinking about managers. This is my eternal question, because one of the roles that I see changing the most is that of managers, going from hopefully leaving the operational parts to more managing. As you were saying, if we focus on outcome rather than hours put in, the manager is very, very much needed in terms of setting these KPIs and the goal setting. So it's much more about being a manager than actually doing the job intended for the teams. But this obviously requires upskilling, and this is an area that we should cover as well. Managers, this is more soft skills and communication. What does the report say about upskilling in terms of leadership?
So upskilling has been a topic which we've been talking about for a few years now, but only recently it's become really on the agenda of business leaders. When we talk about upskilling, we're referring not purely to training. Upskilling is about supporting employees or them upskilling themselves to be able to keep up with changing times. For example, as the most basic example, you were previously in a very manual job, paper-based, and now you're working with systems. Everything's online. So that requires a level of upskilling to help the employee to be able to keep up with that change, for them to remain relevant. I'm sure it's a bad word, but that's the reality. For your skills to remain relevant in a digital world. And in fact, the government this year has done a massive commitment towards this in the last budget of this year, which was, I think, announced 2 months ago. They've committed 4 million euros to upskilling, which is huge at our scale in Malta. 2 million of this allocation is going to go through a national study to understand skills locally. So where are our gaps in terms of skills? And do we have the skills locally to be able to keep up with digital transformation? The other 2 million are going to be allocated to help organizations apply for funding to upskill their staff. So,
No, I was thinking, because it's not only, when we talk about upskilling, we're not talking changes of people. We're talking about adapting current people in their current roles to their changing roles.
Exactly that. Because we need to distinguish between upskilling and reskilling. Upskilling is what you've described. You learning new skills to keep up with these changes. And it usually involves at least 6 months of intense training. So it's just like I've sent you to an e-learn or one time. Reskilling is something completely different. It is where we're getting somebody, reskilling them to work on a completely different role. And we've seen reskilling during the pandemic where people from tourism were reskilled to work in a different industry because there was no work in the tourism sector at the time. So at the moment, we're still in time to focus only on upskilling. If we don't act now, so to speak, we'll end up with the reskilling part, where people will be so behind in terms of the training they've received that they might no longer be able to keep up with the job that they have.
They won't be skilled.
And from the survey we've recently issued, there are 2 main domains of upskilling. There's the digital skills and the people skills. And when we speak about people skills, we're not only talking about soft skills. It's about skills which can't be replaced by technology. So creativity, problem solving, innovation, entrepreneurship, resilience. These are the people skills as part of upskilling, which we need to actually be exposed to in terms of either through a coach or just on the job training. Digital skills aren't just about learning how to use an IT system. There's change management, for example, which people need to learn to understand the change implications of a project. The impact on skills and ability, the impact on processes, the impact on communication required. These are all different components of change management, which leaders and managers need to receive training on. So this is just an example of a few skills which we haven't yet really appreciated the significance of them. And there are many horror stories which we can think back over the last 10 years where companies have tried to implement a system and it failed completely. And not only locally, but in the UK, there's a story about the NHS who tried to implement an HR system which cost like £1 billion and it failed. And one of the biggest reasons for this failure of transformation is because we struggle with the people side of the change. So
because of communication, or
because things like, for example, change impact assessments wouldn't have been carried out to understand the impact on the people, their skills, the processes they're going to use, what technology they're going to be exposed to, change readiness, for example, which we carry out to understand where do people fit in on a change curve in terms of what they're experiencing. So we lack, so to speak, understanding how people's experience is being impacted by it. And I have kind of the privilege to work with some excellent leaders locally who I see modeling exactly the right attitude towards it. They know they've got the project manager, they've got the tech gurus working on it, but they're, as a leader, most of their time is spent talking to people, talking to the management to understand how people feel about the change. Do they have the right skills for it? What communication have they received? If you don't tackle that, resistance can grow. And if there's resistance, people won't use what you're trying to implement, and it fails. So that's where a lot of my kind of time is spent. So understanding how to study people's attitudes and behaviors and needs and expectations to align all of these different elements to be behind the change and to lead it and to support it.
To become a part of the organization. Have you seen our organizations, from your respondents, are organizations ready doing this? Are they currently working on their change management in terms of processes, upskilling, potentially reskilling?
Okay, so my exposure to clients might be a bit biased in favor of the good examples, right?
Yeah.
Because often when I'm in a room with a CEO talking about these things, he or she is already mindful of these implications, and that's the reason they've come to an external consultant to talk about this and to see how they can get it right. So probably many of the bad stories we aren't hearing about, but there are times when we come in a bit late. So they would have already started changing, implementing, going through their transformation journey, and they realize something is wrong. They have a lot of resistance. People aren't happy. And then we come in and do our assessments to understand what's going on, have workshops with the employees to understand what the issues are. So it's a bit of a mix, though. I do work with a lot of people who know that they should be thinking about it. They might not understand the specific things to look at exactly, but they know where to look. And then that's where they come to an external consultant to try and do the research to understand what's going on.
They know that they have options. Now, if people cannot reskill, they cannot upskill, organizations cannot find any skills whatsoever in Malta, do we see a trend of companies thinking moving outside of Malta, moving abroad, or what actions are taken?
So you've just touched on the biggest issue locally, the availability of talent. This is the number one thing, which is on a top 3 concern of most, if not all, HR and business leaders locally. So there's 2 sides to this. There is the lack of actual people, lack of available people to apply. So we meet organizations who are very attractive employers, with good jobs, value adding jobs which they have vacancies for. But they tell us, listen, we've only received 10 applications for this. What's going on? Of these 10, there's 2 who we can speak to, and then it's a very limited pool. The second part of this is that the lack of skills. So we're seeing that, for example, organizations are trying to carry out work, and they end up having to go to third-party outsourced entities to take care of it for them, which is very expensive, because they can't find people to either internally or externally to do this. And this issue isn't only locally; it is across the world. I would say, especially in Europe. In America, for example, they aren't really experiencing this at the moment because they're going through what they're calling the Great Resignation. So people are resigning, in the millions. So there's lots of applications available. In Europe, we don't have this. Employment is very strong, and so there's a bit of a dilemma. Now, regarding looking abroad, companies have begun looking overseas to set up offices to recruit people in those local territories. Now, the problem with this is that it's extremely expensive. There are organizations who have begun looking into it, others who have done it, and in both situations, they see it almost not feasible because of the tax implications, fiscal implications, the recruitment, the training employees virtually, the twice a year flying them over to actually meet the team in person. It is not as simple as just saying, I'm going to open an office in Spain because there's lots of developers. It's a massive investment which many local organizations cannot afford.
But that's kind of, it sounds like the last destination. If people are not coming to Malta, if it's external talent that is needed, then this is obviously the last step, which is kind of urgent and not a very good sign.
It's a massive issue, and that's probably one of the reasons why the government has committed the 4 million euros I described. The 2 million to upskilling and the 2 million to understanding the digital, the skills availability in Malta. Because imagine trying to bring a new industry to Malta when the local ones are struggling already to have enough people to do the jobs.
But question on that, when the local ones are not, I'm thinking myself, I've moved back home, if you like, because of the possibilities, because we could move to the very place that we wanted, the only place that we wanted, and we all of a sudden we could do it. Maybe that's what other people are feeling as well. So there is less tendencies of traveling. But my real question to you is more like, do you have any insights of how many people are expats, non-Maltese, are coming to Malta year on year?
So what I can recall having read is that during the pandemic, people felt that there was a massive exodus of people leaving the country. In the thousands, people felt that people are leaving and not coming back. The government looked into this, from what I recall, and they said that the majority of Europeans stayed, the vast majority of Europeans stayed, and the ones which left were non-European employees. So right now, we're not seeing, a shift where people leave the country. Yes, there's an element of people who leave, but that's always been the case. If we look at, for example, the iGaming industry has probably the highest turnover of all industries locally. Now, the iGaming industry in Malta is one of the best employers locally. They set the standards for employer branding. They set the standard for employee experience locally. They create incredible opportunities in terms of jobs and training, but still they have a very high turnover rate. The reason for this is because, and this was a study by the central bank about 2 years ago, it found that of foreign employees, 25% of them leave in the first 6 months, 50% leave in the first year, and by 2 to 3 years, 80% of expats who are European, they leave again. And this isn't a local problem. It isn't a local trend. It's European. People who are ready to work from a different country move around a lot. And the iGaming industry has a vast proportion of the employees who are non-Maltese. For example, at Evolution, I think we were 600 people at the time. I was one of 20 Maltese people. So you can imagine how many non-Maltese people there were coming and going. And at first you think, is it a company problem? What's going on? But when you look at the data, it is just a trend, a European thing where people come, spend 2 years maximum, and then they move on.
Yeah. Worth mentioning, last year, despite the very high turnover and churn, the gaming sector was still up 12% in terms of recruitment. So it's not only people leaving; it's a high recruitment.
There is the growth, of course. Yeah, there's the growth, which everyone's very grateful for. The growth has continued to increase. Actually, during the pandemic, iGaming has had exponential increase in actual work, because people were for example, more people were home to use those services. What we're saying is that the growth is there, and they're continuing to employ people, though the length of time people stay is not very long. We're talking about 2 years. Do
you know why? Because I have members, and there are trends in HR gaming feeling like Malta is becoming less attractive to move to as an expats. What's this?
So here, Malta has gone over the past 10 years through a massive construction boom, partly to keep up with this volume of people who want to work in Malta. Now, the downside of this construction boom was that it can be dusty. There's always a crane or a construction site nearby. The environment took a bit of a hit, because where before there might have been a field, now it's constructed. So it is a real experience that we're experiencing, that people are seeing too many changes in terms of infrastructure and construction locally. In fact, now the people have shifted their priority from over the past 10 years, it's been about, how do I increase, for example, if I'm a business owner, how do I increase revenue, profitability? Now people care a lot more about the environment than they did in the past, because it's becoming a real issue, a real challenge. So if I had to, we haven't had a study about this. It would be very interesting to look into exactly. But if I had to pinpoint why there's this, this perception of lack of attractiveness locally,
exactly,
it is the lack of available environment and a bit too much construction, I would say.
Yeah. From my end, last thought from your side. Put your gaming glasses on, Mark, and scan through the report again. What is there anything specific that you can pick out from the results that goes to gaming? Can you identify gaming in any particular way?
So, in terms of gaming, what we saw was the highest proportion of fully remote work was from the gaming industry. Pretty much very limited full remote work outside of that industry. We saw that the iGaming industry was the best prepared to handle the pandemic of all other industries, in terms of technology being available, in terms of having the right culture to go through a change, where gaming is so fast paced that people are used to things. They're very agile. The processes are very agile, and the people are very agile. So we saw that the gaming industry was the best place to tackle the pandemic for various reasons. There is the technology, there is the people's mindset, there is the managerial style is very open to flexibility, and they also gaming also prioritizes well-being already. So one of the biggest issues we saw during the pandemic, obviously, is the issue on well-being. Mental health has become a serious concern. It always has been. It's been on the rise for many years, but the pandemic has catalyzed this issue of well-being, and the gaming industry were the best place also to deal with this, offering psychology services to employees already, having coaches who are trained and managers trained on mental health first aid. So if I had to summarize the iGaming results, it would be
investors behind it, obviously making it feasible to have these employee services.
Yeah, for sure.
What have we not talked about? Is there anything that you feel like Heidi didn't even ask about this?
I think this topic of well-being probably, which we touched upon now. It's
what
I'm
have
a
you
bit.
seen organizations do?
That's the problem. Not much.
Yeah.
If I'm
Not
honest.
much.
That's the problem with well-being, with mental health specifically, not well-being. And, to be a bit more granular on mental health. We're not seeing many well-being strategies, mental health strategies being implemented. Things are very reactive. The employee goes through a crisis. Something's obviously wrong. Let's talk to him and see what we can do. It is very reactive. We're not seeing enough locally proactive approach towards mental health, which is a very, very serious thing. The World Health Organization pre-COVID had referred to anxiety as the 21st epidemic, 21st century epidemic. Now we know that the real pandemic was COVID, but that's how serious it was taken, and that anxiety is considered as a disease by the WHO as well. So we have so much data available telling us how serious mental health is. We have so much data telling us that younger generations are more prone to anxiety, more prone to depression, more prone to burnout. Yet we're not doing enough to tackle this, to understand exactly what we can put in place in the at work to mitigate these issues from growing, because they're there. There was actually coincidentally a study this week, which was published by the government, which surveyed 4,000 workers in Malta. It found that half of them have experienced depressive episodes, and 1/4 require professional help. That is a staggering figure.
Yes.
So why aren't we doing enough? Why isn't this taken as seriously as training is taken seriously, as recruitment is taken seriously? And I think that is the one area where I hope in a year's time we'll talk about how much has been done about this, because right now, unfortunately, we don't see it.
Exactly. The stigma is still around it, with pinpointed sessions, and many companies have mental health first aiders, but to remove the taboo and openly speaking about it.
100%.
Yeah. Any glory story on that? Have you seen anything that sort of can give any inspiration to organizations listening into this?
On well-being, on mental health. Recently, I was speaking with an organization who trained. They identified champions, well-being champions, and they trained these champions on mental health first aid, how to detect mental health issues, how to have constructive conversations with employees where there's no judgment, where they don't feel like they're being judged, or that they feel there's confidentiality in those conversations, to be able to have a culture where well-being is a normal conversation, where you talk about feeling anxious or maybe even depressed, at least with these champions who will be able to listen. And these champions, their role is to then speak to the leaders of the organization, to get them more mindful on the realities of the organization. To them, listen, this is actually something which, it's a problem here. We can't, bury our head in the sand. It's a reality, and people need to feel that at least the leaders are understanding of mental health, and they listen, and that they're ready to support where necessary. One of the biggest supportive structures in mental health is feeling like people can listen and they understand what you're talking about, so they can empathize with your experience. That is already enough. Well, not enough, but it's already a massive step forward, where, if you hear a leader saying, listen, well-being is a perception, well-being issues are perception, we have such a great environment at work, we have free coffee, we had a team building. The employee listening to that, who's passing through mental health issues, is going to say, at work, it's not. I'm never going to talk about this. I'm just going to be stigmatized or judged.
Yeah, I'm seeing communication as a key or a solution to basically everything. In this case, like the proactive, you're talking about coaching. for everyone, not only for managers, for the individuals.
Yeah.
Again, people that listen, and you get a possibility to filter and prioritize. Probably said this in all my podcasts, but I really, really think that that's one of a very simple few measurements that a company can take.
And it's so simple, you know.
Yes.
We're not talking about, you know, any kind of investment or minimal. It's about
no, you're talking about increased productivity in the end as well, because you have
there's a real
prioritizing person that does the job.
And if nothing else, there's a business case behind focusing on these things, because employees obviously who have struggled with mental health could have decreased productivity. It could impact the culture in the organization. So there's absolutely no reason, except for avoiding the obvious, to not tackle these very, very important topics.
Mark, next year, this time, we do the same and see where we are with mental health, hybrid, working hours. How did everything go with the 18 months, governmental new setups? Your game?
Would love to, for sure, 100%.
Fantastic. Should we leave it for then?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy your suntan.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a real pleasure.
Fantastic.
And yeah, just thank you.
Let's stay in touch. Speak soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ciao.